Art is like an addiction. Once you start doing it, it's hard to stop. The visual landscape inspires me. Contrasts of color, the surprise of finding relationship to one another. And making an image that sparkles and works. I work on something from the time I get up in the morning till the time I go to bed almost every day. I've been a portrait painter. As such, I'd become what we call object bound. I was all interested in that object that was sitting there and neglected the rest of the space around. But every square inch of the surface should be equally considered, and I wasn't doing that. Doing the woodcuts, where you have to touch every corner of the print, it worked much better for me. It just seemed like a process that was natural to me. I loved, slashing up the wood or cutting it, and I like the feel of the knife going through the wood and the gouges and so on. Picasso supposedly was the inventor of this process. As I understand it, he was a bit unhappy with the registration of one block to another. It's rather difficult when you're doing multiple blocks to get them registered to one another. So I guess he came up with this idea of doing it all from one block. You take a block of wood, a flat piece of wood, and you print the whole surface. Say you print it yellow. Now, anything that you'd want to remain yellow in the finished print, you would have to remove from the surface before you print the next color. So anything that you'd cut out of the surface would remain yellow. This same process just continues from one step to the next. You just, it's a process of cutting and printing and cutting and printing. Wherever I travel, I take photographs. When I get the photographs back, I go through them trying to find images or parts of images that I think I can work with. From there, I do watercolor sketches of each photograph. Well, the watercolor gives me an idea of if I can work with that image, and whether by the changing of tones or colors and shifting of perhaps emphasis, I can make this into something that I relate to and think that I can work into a woodblock wood. From there I select the images and I draw the image from the watercolor onto the block in pen and ink. And the next step is to print the first color. Now, the first color is usually a light color, say in the range of a yellow ochre. It may not be yellow ochre, it may be pure yellow, something that's in the very pale range, may even be pale lavender. Usually this is printed with the use of a stencil placed over the block, and small areas or maybe large areas show through, so that I can either, so that I can mask off areas and not print them. The first few inkings, it requires considerably more ink because you also have to build up ink onto the stencil. And after there's enough ink on the stencil, then of course it just transfers each time you transfers to the cutout areas each time you run across it. This presses the ink, transfers the ink from the block to the paper. This is an etching press. See this? As you can see, pressure is fine, but I'd have to cut down on the ink a little bit. After the first printing, anything that's going to remain in the finished product will be removed from the surface before the next printing. I do most of the work with this number 11 X-Acto knife, from cutting small lines like this to cutting around areas like this to be removed. Now the area that's in here would be removed with a gouge. This gouge that I use for removing small areas. For large areas to be removed, I would use this. For instance, in this case, where the sky is finished and there'll be probably a large block area right in here, I'll use this large gouge to remove it, just because it's faster and more expedient. Probably the hardest is cutting around the raised surfaces. If, for instance, say a tree goes into the sky area, it has to end up a raised surface. So I have to know exactly where it's going to be, so that when I'm through printing the sky, I can cut around the tree and remove the sky from behind it, and then print the tree over the top of the sky. You're building up the image on the paper as you subtract from the block. The process just continues, the process of destroying the surface of the block, and in the end, hopefully get an acceptable print. I don't see my work as naturalistic. as most people would say, realistic. I'm working with abstract elements. The idea is that the print or the work of art should speak in terms of shapes and colors, and it should incidentally be a landscape. It should be the arrangement of shapes and the contrast of colors and textures and so on that you should first be aware of. My training said that you always compare yourself to the greatest, to the masters. If you fall short, which you most probably will, you have to strive harder.